You are standing in a field in 1947. A man is welding pieces of stamped metal together in a small workshop. He has no engineering degree. He served as a tank mechanic. He was wounded almost to death. And in 18 months, the rifle in his hands will become the most produced firearm in human history. You know this weapon. You have seen it in movies, in news footage, in the hands of soldiers, rebels, and children. But you do not know the real story. Because the official story was built by a government that needed a hero. And heroes do not always tell the truth. His name was Mikhail Kalashnikov, and the rifle bearing his name would outlive empires. Let's go back further. World War II. The Eastern Front. The deadliest theater of the deadliest war in history. German soldiers carried something Soviet engineers had never seen in mass numbers. The Sturmgewehr 44, a rifle that could fire on automatic but was light enough to carry and control. The Soviets had nothing like it. Their riflemen used bolt-action weapons from a different era. Slow, single shot. Built for a war that no longer existed. Stalin's military command saw the gap. And they understood something brutal and simple. The next war would not be won by the best trained soldier. It would be won by whichever army could put the most firepower into the hands of the least trained conscript. So in 1946, the Soviet Union launched a competition. Engineers across the country submitted rifle designs. Kalashnikov, recovering from war wounds in a military hospital, entered too. He was not the most qualified. He was not from Moscow's elite design bureaus. But his design, simple, loose-fitting, almost crude by Western standards, won. Why? Because it worked when nothing else did. Drop it in mud, bury it in sand, freeze it in snow. It still fired. Western rifles of the era jammed under those conditions. The AK-47 did not care. Its parts had room to move, room to breathe, room to function, even caked in dirt that would seize a more precise design completely solid. Is reliability more powerful than perfection? In war, the Soviets had already decided the answer. By 1949, the rifle was standard issue across the Soviet army. But its real transformation came later. And this is the part of the story that was never supposed to reach the West. The Soviet Union did not just deploy the AK-47, it gave it away. Blueprints were shared with allied communist states, China, North Korea, East Germany, and eventually dozens of nations across Africa, Asia, and Latin America fighting wars of independence or revolution. No licensing fees, no royalties, no paperwork trail the West could easily follow. It was not a product. It was a weapon of ideology, mass-produced and mass-distributed as a tool of global influence. Think about what that meant. A teenager in a jungle in Mozambique could be carrying the exact same rifle as a soldier in East Berlin. A guerrilla fighter in Vietnam's dense undergrowth could field strip and reassemble it in under 30 seconds, in the dark, without tools. This was not an accident of design. It was the entire point. The numbers are almost impossible to comprehend. Historians and arms researchers estimate that somewhere between 75 million and 100 million Kalashnikov pattern rifles have been produced since 1947, more than every other rifle family in history combined. That means roughly 1 in every 5 firearms on Earth traces its lineage back to that workshop in 1947. How does a single design end up in the hands of 1/5 of the world's weapons? The answer is brutal economics. The AK-47 was cheap, stamped sheet metal instead of expensive machined parts. Simple enough that factories with minimal industrial infrastructure could produce it. Countries with almost no manufacturing base, Egypt, Iraq, Sudan, Yugoslavia, North Korea, built their own versions under license or by simple reverse engineering because nobody was stopping them. There was no global enforcement mechanism strong enough to contain a design this simple, this cheap, and this politically convenient for the Soviet bloc to spread. By the late 1960s and into the 1970s, the rifle appears in nearly every major conflict zone on the planet. The Vietnam War, where Viet Cong fighters preferred it over the early, unreliable American M16. The Soviet-Afghan War, where it armed fighters on both sides of the conflict. Civil wars across Africa in the decades that followed, where it became so common that it required no formal military supply chain at all. just a black market and a willing buyer. And here is the part of the story that rarely makes it into the history books. Mikhail Kalashnikov, the man whose name became inseparable from global conflict, spent much of his later life reportedly troubled by what his invention had become. He gave interviews expressing that he had designed the rifle to defend his homeland, not to arm every militia and insurgency on Earth. He did not patent it. He did not profit from the billions of dollars in value the weapon eventually represented. The Soviet state took the design and gave it to the world. And the inventor watched as a tool of national defense became the weapon of choice for some of the most brutal conflicts in modern history. Did one man's invention escape his control the moment his government decided what to do with it? By the time the Cold War ended, the AK-47 was no longer just a Soviet weapon. It had become a symbol. It appears on the national flag of Mozambique, the only national flag in the world to feature a modern firearm. It appears in the emblem of Hezbollah. It has been carried by revolutionaries, dictators, child soldiers, and freedom fighters, often within the very same conflict on opposing sides, using the exact same rifle. Today, more than 75 years after that workshop in 1947, the AK-47 and its countless variants remain in active use in conflicts across the globe, in parts of Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. Military researchers and arms control organizations have continued to track its presence in modern conflict zones well into this decade, noting how a Cold War design built for Soviet conscripts is still the weapon most likely to be found in the hands of irregular fighters anywhere on Earth. You were standing in a field in 1947, watching a wounded tank mechanic weld stamped metal into something simple. You did not know you were watching the birth of the most widespread weapon in human history, one that would outlive the empire that built it, outlive the man who designed it, and still be reshaping conflicts on every continent decades after the war it was built for had already ended.